I was 5 going on 6. And at that age, you say 5.5. Okay. But I was a typical, young boy. I took my sister's um, dollhouse, which I wish I had now because it was an antique. And I actually did a demolition derby on it and left it apart in the backyard. Of course, made her mad. And I was told to go out and clean it up. Now, it's probably about 5 o'clock at night, and it was late fall. So it gets dark early. And so I'm out the back, and the porch light's on, and I'm picking the pieces up and putting it where they told me I need to put it by the garbage cans. And I went to go back inside, and I reached for the door handle, and I just reached the door handle, and I felt this burning pain in my right ear, behind my right ear. And I went like this, and I hit a black wasp, and it fell on the ground, and it made me dizzy, and I got in the house. I managed to go through the back porch, through the kitchen, through our dining room, and into the living room, where my sister, she kind of speaks. She goes, "Oh my God!" I was blown up like the Michelin tire boy. My eyes were almost completely shut. I could hardly breathe. I had an anaphylactic shock. So she called. My father was away, and called my godfather to come over and get me to the hospital. And I don't know what about the ambulance or anything, but I went in a one of the police cars. The last thing I remember when I got in there was the officer saying to me, "Would you like the siren on?" I said, "Yes," and that's it. I died in the car. They got me to the hospital. Now, this is all other than what I remember, what I was told. They got me to the hospital and worked on me, and I did not, they didn't revive me. I was clinically dead for 15 to 20 minutes. Now, they did pack me in ice. That's something that they did tell me they did, which was to bring the swelling down from, the poison and the venom. What I saw was something a little different than what I've read and seen in other people's. Now I'm 5 or 6 years old, so I don't have much of the world in my mind, at this point. I was riding on top and inside this gray black tornado. That's the only way I can describe it. I could see all the way down, and it was whirling all the way up, and I was inside it. And like sitting inside, hanging on to the edge, just riding it. But there were people, there was male voices in my ear. I wasn't really listening to them as much as they're just talking to me, like comforting me and everything. And I wasn't afraid. I never felt threatened or scared or any of that. I was just kind of, look at this, type thing. And they were talking all the time, and it was all very calm, very, serene type voices. They weren't very, there's no excitedness, nothing. I came into this area. I would say a room, but I'm going to say an area because it went on forever, black with little spotlight, just spots of light, very well-defined spots of light. And there are people in each one of them. I could see them in the distance. I could see movement. I could see people. And there were people standing around it, and there was people inside it. And I came rolling up to one. And inside the spot was two younger boys, probably my age, and a little girl. And I remember the little girl more than the little boys. The little boys had like blue on, but the little girl had a sundress with a very ruffled collar, and it was beige with little blue flowers, which I found out later on were forget-me-nots, which was kind of apropos. And they were playing with puppies. Now, the reason I know there were people standing around, I could see like images in the dark, right at the edge of the light, of people standing there watching them play with these puppies. And the little girl looked up at me. She goes, "Well, come on down and play with us." And I went to go, and voices here said, no, you can't do that. That's not something you can do. Then the little girl looks up at me again and she goes, well, then here, take one of the puppies. And she reached up with a puppy. Now she had black patent leather shoes on, beige. This is so clear in my mind. It never has left my mind, the images. And she reaches up, she goes, here, take one of the puppies. And the moment I reached down, I felt this like, I don't know if anybody's ever touched 110 volt outlet and felt that jar, but that's what I felt. And I just went like in reverse from what I did coming in. And the next thing I did, I opened my eyes up and there's a sheet over me. I could see the lights through the sheet. And of course I was down like this and I put my hands up and just went like this with the sheet and sat up and said, where's my mom? And they didn't expect it. There was quite a large screech from the nurse and the doctor. They both backed up. And I felt itchy and tingly all over my body. They did what they had to do. And of course, at some point I went home. And that was really it. But after that, I saw things and heard things. The house became very active. And my mother told me later on in years when I talked about it, that it had never been that way until the day that I came home. And there was things moved around. I had the oddest dreams, but I would say it was probably about 5 years after my brother was murdered in Troy. And we had, since buried him. And I was sleeping in my bed and I was having a dream about this whole incident again when the phone rang outside in the hall. And the only reason I'm telling you is because all of a sudden I got this connection that was made. And a lot of people say that happens within a DE. I picked the phone up and years ago, now I'm talking about, this is the 50s, late 50s. When you got a long distance call, it sounded long distance, crackly. It was kind of distant voice. It was a little fuzzy, The voice says, I go, hello. And the voice says, now my brother's name was Joseph, but his nickname was Butch. And he said, Ray, this is Butch. Tell mom and dad I'm okay. And you be a good boy. And I said, all right. And I was half asleep when this happened. I go, all right, yeah, okay, I'll talk to you later. And I hung the phone up. Went back to bed, went to sleep, got up the next morning, and I go down to the breakfast, and I'm sitting there. My dad says, who was on the phone last night? I'm like, at that time, my mother was very distraught because of my brother's passing. I knew inside me that says, that's not a good idea to say anything, at that time. And I said, I don't know, it was nobody. And I hung up. Later on, my father had passed years and years after I was married, had kids. And I went over and visited my mom each morning before I went to work. And I just felt I had to say something. And I said, I got to tell you something I didn't tell you before. She says, she goes, what was that? And I said, remember the night that the phone rang after Butch died? And she says, yeah. I go, and you asked me who was on the phone? She goes, yeah. She goes, I said, it was Butch. He wanted to let you know that he was okay. And he told me to be a good boy. She goes, I knew it was something like that. So, excuse me. Since then, it's been one thing after another with these connections.